have a lot of inside lingo, what I would call the things we use every day. And you've talked about using sport as a vehicle. I want you to dive into it a little bit more. It's very familiar to me, but for the audience, that might be a very new concept. If there's a parent listening or a coach, how can you describe using sport as a vehicle?
Well, I think sometimes we start to identify ourselves with the sport. I am a figure skater. I am an ice dancer. I am a hockey player. I am whatever it is. And we lock into that as our definition instead of saying, I figure skate. I play hockey. I'm using hockey or figure skating to get myself onto the podium or onto the next level. I want a Stanley Cup. I want a scholarship. I want to be able to really learn personal and professional skills inside the container called sport. And the values of sport, whether it's figure skating or ice hockey, if they align with the values growing up as a family, and they're things like competitiveness and challenge and resiliency and overcoming adversity, you learn those things in sport. But if you make sport the end game, or if you make the Olympic Games or the Stanley Cup the end game, when it's over, it's over. And I always say to my clients is that, yes, you love the sport. Yes, you love to train. Yes, you love to win. But it's very difficult to love something that can't love you back. What you can love are the values and the growth and development and the community and the people and the contribution. That's what you can love. So when I say sport is a vehicle to get what you want, it's how you can use the sport. And here's the thing, before it uses you, because sport can chew you up and it can spit you out.
I resonate with that very clearly. Honestly, like in our journey together, I was done. I was not interested in doing any kind of coaching or any kind of, commitment to sport development because I did feel very jaded at the end of my competitive skating. And you're right, it can use you if you're not using it. And it's funny, one of the questions I had ready for you was, would you change anything in sport? Or do you feel like it's the perfect place to use adversity training for personal development? What do you
That's
think?
a great question. Really great question, Jadene. I think I wouldn't change a thing. I've been changing things in myself as I go, and I re-choose all the time if I'm going to stay, especially in competitive ice dance. It's probably known as one of the most politically incorrect sports in the world because it's not just a sport where you have athleticism. You also have art, and then you have judgment. So you have all the things that are just a microcosm of our daily life. So if I say, okay, I want to change something in sport, then I think we remove one of the things that is important is resiliency. It's overcoming adversity. It's not taking things personally. It's learning how to overcome things. Honestly, there are so many, one-liners about sport, about, taking 100 shots or falling down 100 times, getting up 101. Those are great. But the truth is, if you're really embracing sport as a vehicle and as a values-based commitment that you have to your life, then it doesn't matter what the rules are on the outside. That's the external environment. The external is always going to change. And that's the other thing I've learned in sport, especially in ice sports, is that what stays consistent and constant is myself. So I can put myself in any arena. I can go out with novices, pre-novices in ice dance or in figure skating. And I can go out with pros and Olympic champions, and I stay the same. I stay the same. The environment always is going to change. And the earlier you learn that in sport, and the earlier you know that you can control your own responses, your own reactions, and your own inner environment, the better you're going to do in life overall.
I love the term inner environment. Boy, do I love that. I don't know if you've heard this, I'm sure you have at some point, but skaters blaming the ice, like, ooh, the ice is too bumpy. Or it's just, that's just flat ice or jet ice. And I'm always saying to them, if you are a professional and you show up as you can skate on anything, anytime, anywhere. And I know that you have experience with that because you've been all over the world. I mean, I don't know if there's a time zone you haven't hit or an arena you haven't hit, but what have you learned from that international travel and being in those different environments? Is it really about that inner landscape?
That's all it's about. And that's the journey working with Olympic champions over the last 8-10 years and Olympic gold medalists. It's not like I'm just dabbling and going to the Olympics. Many people, when they set goals, they want to go to the Olympics. And I said, do you want to go to the Olympics or do you want to compete at the Olympics? So the first thing I do in creating that inner environment is getting them setting their goals in a way that they can get their goals. And then they start to see where the landscape has to adjust to their inner environment. But until you're willing to look inside and look at what it is that you really want, it's very difficult, because that can be painful for people, is to really take full responsibility for their results. And like you say, there's always an excuse. It's not about the ice. Everybody's going to have an excuse about anything. And there's different arenas. Honestly, we did an international competition last week or 2 weeks ago in an arena that they play, minor hockey, and there's nothing on the boards. There's lines on the ice, but there's world-class competitors out there. They don't care. They're there to do a job. Same thing in my experience with hockey players. When I started my power skating business and took it from from Steffany Hanlen's power skating to quantum speed, high performance skating systems, I was having Edmonton Oilers hockey players on the ice with 9-year-olds.
Wow.
And now I have players that say, I can't skate with that person because he's too young, or they're not challenging me. So what I'm seeing is there's all this external pressure. And yes, I get that there's competitiveness, and I fold that into all the programs that I have. But the truth is, if you're going to be judging your training or your experience or your ability to be successful on the external environment, then you've already played down 50% of your chance to win.
Ooh. Isn't that the truth? I love that you're bringing that up. And I know that you saying those words is going to help people listening on this podcast. And it really leads me into my next question, which is, I want to dive into this difference between psychology and performance coaching. So, people talk about sports psychology. I have a psych degree. I've been down that path. You've been dabbling in so many different modalities and then landed on your own brand of performance coaching. What is the performance coaching aspect or the mind shift that is actually necessary for athletes? What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just for athletes. I think what I learned when I was starting to study psychology, and then I was veering into the sports psychology, what I stumbled on was something called performance psychology and happiness psychology. And it became a real thing back in the day, in the early 2000s, when I was starting to train as a personal coach and got all my certifications and trained in coaching and all the different levels, and went to Coach U and became an NLP certified trainer and all the things that I thought I was supposed to do. What I realized was it's all the same conversation. Then I started hanging out at the Olympic level and working as a performance coach with Olympic athletes and potential Olympic athletes. And I started hanging out a bit with the sports psychologists. And what I discovered was that when we were in conversations with sports psychologists, they were more about trying to figure out the why. Why is something happening? Why are you having this lack of focus? Why is and then the focus became on focus, and then eliminating distractions and thinking positive. And it was all the things that didn't resonate with me. And I thought, I don't want to, I had just registered for my psychology certificate with the University of Arizona. And I got halfway through that program and said, I'm not into psychology. If anything, I would be into the mental and emotional resilience training of an athlete. How do they embrace the moment and all the distractions and all the adversity and still get to the podium? So I started searching for that course. And guess what? There is no certification in that. There's no degree in it. There's no master's degree. So that's what other things I've been bumping up against as a performance coach. Sports psychologists are now calling themselves performance coaches. So they're dovetailing, which is great. Meaning we need all the support we can get for athletes, no disrespect. And I have a ton of love and respect for the people who've got those after degrees and PhDs in sports psychology. But what I had to do was get my degree out of the practical. I had to dive in and become the coach and the person that I wanted to be and needed to be for the athletes to totally resonate and connect with me. So all the training I've done, all my certifications, all my layers and levels and coach training and NCCP this and is all there. It doesn't go away. But the truth is, I don't want to be dealing in the why. I don't want to be dealing with somebody's historical trauma. If it comes up, then I'm happy to refer to a psychologist, a psychiatrist. If it's not in my realm, I don't cross over. And all the people that I work with understand that. What I'm about is this moment. The what's important now. Win to me is what's important now. And how do I create my future? Not from more positive thinking, but how about less negative thinking? How about learning how to visualize? I had an athlete once. We were working through visualization exercises, and he had been working with some sports psychologists and Skate Canada and US Figure Skating. And a lot of these federations have every single modality and resource you could even imagine. So I was working with him in a little bit and around transition from life after sport and what did he want to do, et cetera, going forward. And then one day we were doing a visualization exercise, because I do that with all my clients, whether they're high net worth H&W clients in business or real estate or in the realm of sport. I do visualization with them because not everybody sees things in pictures. Some people visualize in color and sound and music. Some people aren't visual at all. So I was sitting there and I'm waiting for him to finish his visualization, and I hear this, and he comes out of the visualization. I go, buddy, what's up? And he's like, I fell in the triple axle again. And I went, what? I fell in the triple axle. I go, when? He goes, well, in my visualization. And it hit me is that if we don't teach athletes how to visualize and how to create that physiological response to landing something or taking that shot and scoring, and they're in their visualization, they're not landing a jump, there's something wrong. So I was trying to weave into that and go, okay, yes, teach visualization, but dig deeper. Dig deeper as to, is that person landing the jump in their visualization? It's their visualization. It's theirs. It's in their own head, in their own mind, in their own body. And they're still allowing themselves to fall or miss the shot, miss the net, or not hit the hoop in the basket. And they don't realize how responsible they are, because what our mind is doing connects us to our emotions, and our emotions connect us to our habits, and our habits connect us to our actions, and our actions connect us to our results. So I was really committed to unwinding all that. And again, there was no course in that. I pieced together a bunch of personal development, professional development courses that I had to go to and seek out, because on the surface level, it's easy for a federation or a not-for-profit or an NGO to go, NSF to go, you need to be a double master's. Great, not me. But then they hire somebody with the double masters who doesn't have any field experience. And the athletes are going, this person, I love them to death, but they're trying hard, but they don't know anything about what we're doing. So I had to not make that wrong. And I had to not make me not having those degrees wrong. And then still finding a way to get myself credible, to get myself in a reputation where they know I'm trustworthy. They know I'm fully confidential. They know I'm fully insured, whatever, but I'm not prepared to go down that academic path anymore. Not that I choose not to.
Wow, this is so powerful. And it's a little bittersweet. It's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, and definitely one of the reasons I'm wanting to bring you to a global audience, which our skating success people are now globally available to this podcast. This is exactly what I went through as an athlete, Steffany. Got to a certain stage, got the people that talked to the team, and they came in and we did this visualization session. And yeah, I'm not very visual. And I did fall every single time in my visualization. And then I felt stupid and I felt frustrated and I felt like, why am I doing this wrong? And then there was no step beyond that. There was no relatedness. So what you're saying is so important, that whatever we choose to do as an athlete, or parents listening in with your skater, it has to be practical, right? The win, what's important now in your athlete's life right now. And how do you do that with athletes when they bump up against the really challenging moments, whether it's, they're down after the rhythm dance, or they're low on the Stanley Cup final, or whatever it is? How do you help them handle real-time adversity when what's important now is the hard thing right now and it matters? How do you deal with that?
Well, again, we're dealing with the external environment. If you make a mistake and you frame it as a mistake, then it's very difficult to unframe that. But what I do with my athletes is say, okay, you take a chance, you take off on the jump on the proper edge and you fall, or you, after the rhythm dance, you're seventh and you should have been first. What do you do with that? Well, that's an external experience. My goal is to get them and reframe it back to the point is, in that moment, do you really have any problems? Do you really have any problems? So after we do what's called a debrief or a close, I call it a closing after something that's positive or negative. You either like the result or you don't like the result. If you like the result after a certain event, then we keep doing that. We bring forward what worked, we notice what didn't work, and then we build on top of that. But if we're dealing with something that didn't go wrong, and here's to your point, Jadene, and this is what breaks my heart with athletes, especially figure skaters, is that I don't know if coaches are equipped or if they're trained in some ways to deal with an athlete that's had that kind of adversity, instead of just, okay, smile, wipe it off, think positive. Because even in the coach training I've done through sport, there's not a lot of depth in terms of, okay, what do I do other than just say, I don't have the skills and send them to a sports psychologist for a weekend session or one session. I don't know if that's viable at this stage of the game. The way that the world is right now, and if we're going to use sport as a healthy environment to help athletes and their families stick to their values, we have to know that in order for them to deal with something that was quote unquote negative and a result they didn't like, we have to pull back and go, what did we get from it? What are we going to learn from it? What are you the most disappointed? What are you the most pissed off about? Are you scared to get on the ice tomorrow for the free dance? Absolutely. Okay, let's deal with that. And then I bring it back to the moment and say, okay, well, it's this time on this day and you're laying in your hotel bed. Do you have any problems right here, right now? And then they pause, and then the mind chatter starts to quiet. Do you have any problems right here, right now? Well, then what about the judges and okay, that'd be tomorrow. What's important now? And in the ice dance realm, I'll get them to, if they're a couple off the ice, I'll get them to face each other and do an exercise. If they're not a couple on the ice or off the ice, then I get them on Zoom and we do the exercise. But when you get to the point where we have no real problems in this moment, a lot of the problems we have are made up and they're thrown up after us and at us and shit.
No.
Right? So in that moment, I can get them to calm down, to lighten, soften, and then I can help them reframe it. And the whole point, like between events, for example, if it's a rhythm dance and then the free dance is the next day, I need them to figure out how to invite sleep. Because the rest and recovery after any kind of adrenalized experience, whether it's a high or a low, we have to come to neutral. And in order to come to neutral, we have to be able to acknowledge both exist, the high and the low. As you know, and we've done over the years and worked on, is after a high, there has to be a low. So if we don't neutralize that at the end of an event, even at the end of a practice, maybe that didn't go so well, then it's very difficult to invite sleep. Their appetite can go down. They're not getting the fuel they need. So all of these things internally are affected by this external experience, which truthfully, and this is going to sound a little weird, nothing's real. It's just the perception of what we experience. We make it real. We lock into it. And then we say, okay, this is the way it is. That's how I do it.
It's beautiful. I'm hoping that as a listener, as you're listening in, you are hearing Steffany walk you through the practicality, the steps, the feeling of going, how do I deal with this moment? What's real for me? Oh, what's not real? What doesn't matter? And then pulling it back in, getting to neutral, as you say, allowing the highs and lows and not judging that either, right? And giving the space. And, when we go back to the comment about sport being a vehicle, these are the tools you can take into anything.